I thought it was just another quiet evening until my phone buzzed. A TikTok video, 2 million views, filled my screen. My entire family sat at the dinner table in the house I grew up in, glasses raised, laughter echoing. My mother smiled into the camera and said, "Finally, a dinner without drama." No one had called me, no one had even asked where I was. My chest tightened, but then I saw the comments. Buried halfway down, an anonymous user wrote, "She doesn't even know the real reason she's out." My hands shook as I scrolled for the truth. I was typing an email when my phone lit up on the desk, the screen vibrating against the wood. Out of habit, I reached for it, expecting a work notification or maybe a text from a friend. Instead, a TikTok video was already playing, the sound spilling out into my quiet apartment. My family's living room, our old living room, filled the frame. The same beige walls, the same wooden table that had once been my father's pride. My mother sat at the head, glass in hand, her voice bright and sharp. "Finally, a dinner without drama," she laughed, and the table roared with approval. I froze. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. My mother, my 2 brothers, my sister-in-law, even my husband, laughing, clinking glasses, as if this was just another happy family gathering. But it wasn't, because I wasn't there. No one had called. No one had asked if I was free. No one had even mentioned it to me. My chest tightened, my fingers gripping the phone, until my knuckles went white. I watched the video again, hoping I had misunderstood. Maybe it was old footage. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But the date stamp in the corner told the truth. It had been recorded the night before. I scrolled through the comments, the light from the screen casting a cold glow on my face. Strangers made jokes, complimented the food, asked about the recipe. Then, buried halfway down, I saw it. "She doesn't even know the real reason she's out." My pulse kicked up. What did that mean? What reason? I scrolled further, but the comments author had no other posts. If it were you, would you have messaged them back? I wanted to. I wanted to demand an explanation right there publicly. But my hands wouldn't move, as if speaking would make this all too real. I leaned back in my chair, my mind replaying every family moment from the past few years. There had been signs, small, quiet signs, that I had ignored. The birthday party last year where everyone forgot to invite me until the next morning, when Mom claimed she thought I was too busy. The barbecue at my brother's where my name was somehow left off the group chat. Every time I told myself it was a mistake. Families get messy. People forget. But now, watching them gathered without me, smiling like I had never existed, I felt something colder than hurt. Recognition. I remembered the nights my phone would buzz at 2 a.m., Mom's voice trembling on the other end as she asked for money to cover a small emergency. I always said yes. I never asked questions. But when I was the one lying in a hospital bed last winter, phone in hand, no one came. They all claimed they didn't know until it was too late. I rubbed my temples, the taste of bitterness rising in my throat. "You're too sensitive," Mom had told me once, when I asked why they left me out of a holiday dinner. "We just didn't want to stress you out." Back then, I believed her. Back then, I still thought their love was unconditional. The video kept looping on my phone, the laughter sounding more and more like mockery. And then a flicker of memory, 2 months ago, in the kitchen. Mom leaning in, close to my husband, her voice low but sharp. I couldn't hear every word, but I caught enough. This will all be over soon." When I walked in, they both smiled too quickly, changing the subject to something mundane. I'd brushed it off then. Now the memory tightened like a knot in my gut. I set the phone down, the apartment suddenly too quiet. My eyes drifted to the bookshelf where an old photo album sat. I pulled it down, flipping through pages of birthdays, summer picnics, holidays where my smile reached my eyes. My fingers traced over one picture, me at 8 years old, sitting on my father's lap, the room bright with laughter. I could almost hear his voice again, telling me I'd always have a place at the table. A lump rose in my throat. I hugged the album to my chest and sat there in the dim light. The hum of the refrigerator, the only sound. For the first time in years, I let the silence settle. I let the hurt seep all the way in. Somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't just about one dinner. It was about something bigger. And the comment, about the real reason, wasn't going to leave me alone until I found out. Outside, the street was quiet, a few cars passing under the glow of the street lamp. My phone lay face down on the desk, the screen black, but the weight of what I'd seen pressed against me like a storm cloud. I knew that once I turned it over again, once I started digging, nothing would be the same. But the alternative, pretending I didn't know, was worse. I wasn't ready to act yet, not tonight, but I would be. 2 days passed before I opened the TikTok again. I thought maybe time would dull the sting, but the memory of their laughter clung to me like smoke. I was pouring coffee that morning when my phone buzzed with a message from Claire, a friend from college who had seen me through breakups, job changes, and more than one family drama. "Meg," the text read, "I think you need to see this." A link followed. It was to Reddit in the Am I the Asshole forum. My stomach tightened. I tapped it open, and the title alone made my breath hitch. Ayada for not inviting my sister to family events because she always makes everything about herself. The post unfolded like a distorted funhouse reflection of my life. The sister was supposedly selfish, dramatic, prone to starting arguments at dinners, and obsessed with money. The family had finally found peace without her constant negativity. They even accused her of borrowing money and never paying it back. A claim so far from the truth, it would have been laughable if it didn't sting so sharply. My hands shook as I scrolled down to the comments. Some people defended the sister, but most sided with the family. And then, like a blow to the ribs, I saw it, my husband's username. He had commented, "Totally agree with you. Sometimes you have to cut toxic people out of your life, even if they're family." Underneath, a little red heart confirmed he had liked the original post. I stared at the screen, reading his comment again and again, until the words blurred. There was no plausible explanation for this, no way to twist it into something innocent. The betrayal hit deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't just them, it was him too. I closed the app, my pulse hammering, when another notification appeared. A direct message request from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was a gray silhouette, the name a jumble of numbers and letters. Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Ms. Carter," it began, "you don't know me, but I used to work for your family's attorney. I think you should be aware of certain documents regarding your father's estate." The message continued, explaining that until 2 years ago, I had been listed as the primary beneficiary in my father's will. Then, without my knowledge, my name was removed, and replaced with my brother's. The change had been signed off just weeks after I paid off a significant debt for my mother, a debt she'd sworn was temporary and would be repaid. I sat down hard, the chair legs scraping against the floor. The words blurred, and I blinked until they cleared again. Removed from the will. The phrase felt heavy in my mouth. I typed back quickly, my fingers unsteady. Why are you telling me this now? The reply came within minutes. Because there's more. There's also a loan agreement in your name for $50,000. You never signed it, but it's been filed as if you did. The air in the room thickened, pressing against my chest. A part of me wanted to scream, to call my mother, to demand answers. But another part knew this wasn't the time, not yet. If what this stranger was saying was true, I needed proof, cold, undeniable proof. I asked for copies. Within minutes, PDFs began to arrive, scanned documents with my name typed neatly at the bottom. My signature looked convincing at first glance, but I knew my own handwriting. This was close, but not mine. I clicked through each page, my hands trembling. It wasn't just the will and the loan agreement. There were other things, property transfers, small amounts moved from accounts in my name. Nothing enormous on its own, but together they painted a picture of quiet, deliberate erasure. For a long moment, I couldn't move. I sat there, staring at the glow of the laptop screen, feeling the warmth drain from my body. The hum of the refrigerator in the next room was suddenly too loud. My breathing sounded foreign to my own ears. I closed the documents and leaned back, pressing my palms against my face. My mind spun with questions I wasn't ready to answer. Who had forged my signature? How long had they been planning this? Had my father known before he died? I reached for the photo album, still sitting on the coffee table from the other night. The image of me at 8 years old stared back, all bright eyes and trust. I wondered what that little girl would think if she could see me now. Shaken, betrayed, holding evidence that her family had not just excluded her from dinners, but from her own legacy. The thought sliced deep. I hugged the album to my chest, the edges pressing into my ribs. For a moment, the weight of it all threatened to crush me. I let myself sit in that place, vulnerable, small, unguarded, because I knew it was the last time I could. When I finally set the album down, the air felt different. Lighter, maybe, or sharper. This wasn't over, not even close. But now I had something I hadn't before, a starting point. The day after receiving the documents, I sat at my desk with my laptop, phone, and an unfamiliar surge of focus. I had spent years letting my family dictate the narrative. Now I was going to start collecting my own. First step, iCloud. I logged in and requested a full download of every file, message, and photo ever stored. It took hours, but when the archive was ready, I dove in. I combed through months of photos and videos, looking for anything out of place. That's when I found it, a series of video clips recorded by the security cameras in my own house. In the footage, my living room was full of people. My mother, my brothers, my sister-in-law, even my husband, seated in a loose circle. They were drinking coffee, passing papers, laughing in the casual way people do when they think they're safe. The timestamp was from a weekend I'd been out of town for work. I turned up the volume, straining to hear. Most of the conversation was muffled, but one phrase came through clear. Once she's out, it'll be smooth sailing. My mother's voice. My husband nodded in agreement. My stomach nodded, but I kept listening. The next step was my bank account. I logged into my statements and began tracking every transaction for the past 2 years. There it was, small withdrawals I didn't recognize, adding up over time. Each one transferred to an account in my mother's name. The amounts weren't big enough to set off alarms, but over months they totaled thousands. I printed everything, laying it out across my desk like pieces of a puzzle. It was starting to form a picture, but I needed more. Scrolling through the iCloud files again, I found an audio file I didn't remember recording. I pressed play. Voices filled the room. My mother, my brothers, my husband, and then my name. "We just need to make it official," one of my brothers said. "Once she's gone, no one will question it." My mother replied, "This is the last step. She'll never see it coming." I hit pause, my pulse thudding in my ears. That was it. The confirmation I had suspected but hadn't dared to believe I'd find. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I called Hannah, a friend from my university days who was now a lawyer. I sent her the files, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "I need you to look at this," I told her. She agreed to meet that afternoon. Next was Mark, a journalist I'd met years ago at a charity event. He specialized in uncovering corporate and family fraud. When I explained my situation, he didn't sound surprised. He'd seen versions of this before. "Gather everything," he told me, "and don't confront them yet. We control the timing." Then I reached out to my Aunt Linda, my father's younger sister. She had always been distant from the rest of the family, a quiet presence at holidays. When I told her what I'd found, there was a long pause on the phone before she said, "I think it's time you knew the truth." We met at a small cafe out of town. She brought an envelope, worn at the edges. Inside were photographs. One was a copy of my father's original will, with my name clearly listed as the primary beneficiary. The other was a handwritten letter, dated a month before his death. I unfolded it carefully. My father's handwriting was neat but firm. "If you are reading this, it means things have gone the way I feared. Protect yourself, Megan. There is more to this than they will ever tell you. The key is in the place you first learned to ride." I frowned. "The place I first learned to ride?" Linda smiled sadly. "Your father kept a safe in the barn at the old family property. I don't know what's in it, but he told me once that it was for you." That evening, I drove out to the property. The barn smelled of dust and hay, unchanged from my childhood. In the corner, under a tarp, was a small metal safe. My heart pounded as I entered the combination my father used for everything. His anniversary with my mother. The lock clicked open. Inside, on top of a stack of papers, was a single framed photograph. Me, my father, and my mother, taken before everything soured. We were at the beach, laughing, the wind whipping through my hair. I touched the glass, a lump rising in my throat. Beneath the photo were more documents, bank records, letters, receipts. I didn't read them yet, not here, not with the dust settling in the air around me like ghosts. I closed the safe, clutching the photograph to my chest. For the first time since this started, I felt something other than rage or grief. I felt my father's presence, steady, protective, urging me forward. And for the first time, I believed I might win. The night of December 24th, the old family home was glowing with warm light, every window lit like an invitation. Snow dusted the roof, and the sound of muffled laughter spilled out into the cold air. I parked down the street, my breath forming clouds as I carried my bag toward the front door. Inside was the entire family, my mother at the head of the table, my brothers and their wives, my husband sitting among them as if nothing had happened. They didn't expect me. That was the point. I stepped inside without knocking, the sudden quiet proving they had noticed. I could feel every eye on me as I walked to the center of the room and set my phone on the table, propping it up so the camera faced everyone. "I want you all to hear something," I said. My voice was steady, too steady. I tapped the screen and started the live stream, the little red icon flashing in the corner. Thousands of people were already watching. The audience Mark had helped me build over the past week. The audio file began to play. My mother's voice, my brother's laughter, my husband's agreement. Once she's out, it'll be smooth sailing. Faces around the table shifted, some pale, some hardening into masks. I scrolled to another clip, this time my brother saying, "She'll never see it coming." My mother's voice followed, "This is the last step." The comments on the live stream began flooding in, disbelief and outrage from strangers who now knew exactly who these people were. And then, just as I was about to play the most damning recording, the screen went black. The lights above flickered and died. The room was plunged into darkness, only the faint glow of candles on the mantel remaining. Someone had cut the power. For a moment, no one moved. Then chairs scraped, voices overlapped, half confusion, half panic. I slipped my phone into my pocket and lit the flashlight. "Cutting the power won't erase what I have," I said, my voice sharper now. "Every file is backed up. Every word you've said lives in more places than you can imagine." I left before they could answer, the snow crunching under my boots. By the time I reached my car, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Messages from people who had seen enough before the blackout to know the truth. The next morning, the counterattack began. A Facebook post from my mother claimed I had fabricated evidence to steal money from my family. My brothers shared it. My husband posted his own statement, calling me unstable and desperate for attention. The smear campaign spread fast, but I had been ready for this. I uploaded high-resolution scans of the forged loan agreement, the original will with my name intact, and bank statements showing the steady drain from my account to my mother's. Then I posted the letter from my father, the one warning me to protect myself, the one hinting at secrets they never wanted revealed. The letter was the turning point. People who had doubted me began to change their tone. And then came the second twist. While going through the documents from the safe, Hannah, my lawyer, had discovered something extraordinary. My father's assets were far larger than anyone knew. A separate account, untouched for years, held more than enough to make this fight worthwhile. The realization hit me in waves. My father had hidden the bulk of his wealth, likely to protect it from the same people who had turned against me. And now, with the evidence in hand, I could claim what was mine. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the city lights blinking beyond the window. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by something heavier. I poured myself a glass of water, but my hand shook as I lifted it. The weight of the past weeks, the videos, the betrayal, the confrontation, finally crashed down. I set the glass aside and pressed my palms to my eyes, feeling the heat of tears push through. I hadn't cried in years, not like this. Not the kind of crying that made your shoulders shake and your breath catch. It was ugly, raw, and real. and it was necessary. I let it happen, let the tears fall for the little girl who once believed her family would protect her, for the woman who had to accept they never would. When it was over, I sat in silence, my chest aching but my mind clear. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, I knew I could win. Not just in court, but in reclaiming my own life. The first summons came in early January. My mother, my brothers, and my husband were all formally notified that the court had accepted the evidence and launched a full investigation. Hannah walked me through each step, reminding me that patience was just as important as preparation. In the weeks that followed, subpoenas went out for bank records, property transactions, and phone logs. The forged loan agreement was submitted for handwriting analysis, and the expert's report came back exactly as we expected. It was not my signature. The same conclusion was drawn for two other documents I'd never seen before. One morning, I sat in the courtroom as the judge ordered my mother to return the funds she had siphoned from my account. She kept her gaze fixed on the table, lips pressed into a thin line. My brothers avoided looking at me altogether. By the time the session ended, the air between us felt colder than the winter wind outside. News traveled fast in our small town. By the end of the week, two of my brothers had been asked to step down from their positions at local businesses, companies that couldn't risk being associated with a fraud scandal. Neighbors stopped speaking to my mother in the grocery store. The same people who once invited her to every charity gala now crossed the street to avoid her. It should have felt like vindication, but in truth, it was a strange mix. Satisfaction tangled with something heavier, something that still ached. Then came the next blow to their side. Investigators traced a series of wire transfers to an offshore account registered in the Cayman Islands under my mother's name. The sum was far larger than anything we'd expected. Hannah smiled when she told me. "This changes everything," she said. That night, I stood at my apartment window, watching snow fall in slow spirals under the streetlights. The knowledge of that hidden account was a weapon, one I didn't have to swing just yet, but could keep ready. In February, the story broke wider. Mark's contact at a major true crime podcast reached out, offering me a platform to tell my side in full. We recorded over 2 days, the host guiding me through every detail: the TikTok video, the forged documents, the barn safe, the Christmas Eve confrontation. The episode dropped a week later and shot straight to the top of the charts. Suddenly, people who had only seen my family's curated social media posts were hearing the truth in my own voice. Messages poured in from strangers, some offering support, others sharing their own stories of betrayal by those closest to them. It was overwhelming, but in a way that made me feel less alone. Then, in the middle of all the noise, I received a call from Hannah. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "One of your relatives wants to talk, privately." We met in a quiet cafe, the same one where I'd first met Aunt Linda. This time, it was my cousin Evan, my mother's nephew, slipping into the booth across from me. His eyes darted around before he leaned in. "I'm not proud of what I've done," he began, "but I can help you. In exchange, I want immunity." Evan had been handling some of the family's off-the-books transactions. He knew where the documents were kept, and he had emails that could prove the timeline of the conspiracy. In return for his cooperation, he wanted protection from any legal fallout. Hannah arranged the deal. By the end of the month, We had more evidence than we had ever hoped for. The weight on my shoulders began to shift. The case was no longer just about defense, it was about control. For the first time in months, I was dictating the pace, the narrative, the outcome. One chilly afternoon in March, I drove to the coast. The ocean stretched out in front of me, endless and unbroken, the horizon blurring into the gray sky. I kicked off my shoes and walked across the damp sand until the waves lapped at my ankles. The cold bit into my skin, but I didn't move. I thought about the girl I had been, the one who sat at that family table, laughing and believing it would always be hers. I thought about the woman I had become, the one who had fought to reclaim her name, her life, and her truth. The wind whipped through my hair, carrying the salt and the sound of the surf. For the first time in a long while, I felt it, freedom. Not the kind you imagine, but the kind you earn, inch by inch, through every painful choice. I closed my eyes and let the waves wash over my feet, knowing there was still more to do, but also knowing I could face it. I had already faced the worst. By April, the court proceedings had slowed to a crawl, the worst battles already fought and won. The house I'd been renting, too full of memories, too close to old routines, no longer felt like a place I wanted to live. I signed a lease for a small home on the other side of the city, tucked away on a quiet street where no one knew my name. Packing was easy. Most of what I owned fit into a handful of boxes. The rest I left behind without regret. Changing my number was harder, not technically but emotionally. I had kept the same phone number for 15 years. It was how my father had reached me from hospital beds, how my college friends had found me after years apart. But it was also the number my mother called at 2 a.m. to demand money, the number my brothers used to send smug group photos I wasn't in. I watched as the carrier confirmed the change, the old number disappearing from the screen. Just like that, the line was cut. I didn't announce the move. I didn't tell anyone who didn't need to know. I scrubbed my social media, leaving only neutral posts and vague updates. Every step I took was a brick in the wall between me and them. The first night in my new place was almost too quiet. I sat on the couch with a cup of tea, listening to the creak of the walls and the distant hum of traffic. That's when I heard the sound, a light thud against the front door. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just a single envelope, cream-colored, with no return address. My name was written on the front in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. I locked the door before I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. My father holding me in his arms, my hair blowing across my face as we both laughed at something just out of frame. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were 5 words: "Trust no one but yourself." The weight of those words pressed into me, sharp and bittersweet. I slipped the photo into my desk drawer, knowing I would look at it again, but not tonight. Spring crept in slowly, the air warmer each week. I began to see people again, not the old crowd, not the ones who measured my worth by my usefulness, but those who had shown up for me without condition. Hannah invited me to dinners with her friends. Mark connected me with other survivors of family betrayal, people who understood the strange ache of losing something you never really had. We formed a kind of chosen family. There were no blood ties, no obligations, just mutual respect and care. We met for Sunday brunches, celebrated small victories, and checked in on each other without keeping score. One night in May, we gathered at my place for the first time. The kitchen was filled with the smell of roasted vegetables, the clink of glasses, the hum of voices. At one point, I stepped back from the group, leaning against the doorway and watching them laugh together. There was a lightness to the moment I hadn't felt in years. It struck me then that I had built this, piece by piece, decision by decision. I had cleared enough space in my life for something better to grow. And it had. The letter from my father remained in the drawer, but its meaning had shifted. It was no longer a warning I clung to in fear. It was a reminder of resilience, of self-reliance, of the hard lessons that had shaped me. I thought about the girl in the photograph, her trust unbroken, her world still small. I thought about the woman I had become, stronger, wiser, careful but not closed off, the kind of person who could build a life worth protecting. As the night wore on, candles flickered low, and my friends lingered, telling stories and making plans for summer. I caught myself smiling, not the polite smile I used to wear at family events, but something real, unforced. When the last guest left, I stepped outside into the cool night air. The street was still and quiet, the moon hanging low over the rooftops. I closed my eyes, breathing in the calm. I wasn't naive. I knew there would be other challenges, other people who might try to take what wasn't theirs. But I also knew I had the strength to stop them. My father's words echoed softly in my mind. Trust no one but yourself. And for the first time, they didn't feel like a burden. They felt like freedom.